$250 fine for an unapproved structure, the letter read. At first, Jonathan thought it was a mistake, some kind of clerical error. He stood in his kitchen, staring at the HOA notice, and then out his back window at his perfectly manicured yard. There was no shed. There had never been a shed. Jonathan had moved into Maplewood Estates 3 years earlier, drawn by its quiet cul-de-sacs and tall oak trees. He wasn't a troublemaker. He followed the rules, kept his grass trimmed, kept his trash bins tucked away, even repainted his shutters the bland beige the HOA required. So when this letter showed up, accusing him of erecting a structure without approval, he almost laughed. But the HOA wasn't laughing. A week later, another letter arrived, this one with a photo attached. Jonathan's jaw dropped as he unfolded the print. There, in the center of his backyard, stood a squat gray shed with double doors and a small window. Except Jonathan knew the truth. His backyard was empty. The shed didn't exist. He walked outside immediately, scanning the space where the shed supposedly stood. Nothing, just grass and his kid's swing set. He even measured, walking the length of his yard, shaking his head. No shed, no foundation, no evidence anything had ever been built there. When Jonathan called the HOA office, he got their president, Margaret Denton, a sharp-tongued woman in her late 50s with a blonde bob and pearls she wore like a badge of authority. She listened without patience. "Mr. Clark, we have photographic evidence," she said coldly. "Evidence of what?" Jonathan shot back. "That picture is fake. There's no shed." Margaret's voice turned smug. "Then you'll have no problem removing it and paying the fine." Jonathan hung up, furious. He knew what he was dealing with, an HOA president drunk on power, but he also knew this was more than a simple fine. Someone was trying to scam him. And Jonathan wasn't about to let that slide. Determined to prove his innocence, Jonathan printed out the HOA's evidence photo and stared at it under a desk lamp. At first glance, it looked real, but then he noticed the shadows, unnatural angles, the shed casting a line where no trees should have been. Even the grass color seemed mismatched, a slightly different shade around the shed's base. "This is doctored," Jonathan muttered. He called his neighbor, Rebecca, who worked as a graphic designer. When she saw the photo, her eyebrows shot up. "Oh, this is absolutely photoshopped. Look here, the pixels don't line up. They literally copy-pasted a shed onto your yard." She zoomed in and pointed at faint blur lines. Amateurs. Jonathan's anger hardened into determination. The next HOA meeting was only days away. He'd go, stand up, and expose this nonsense. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed with the usual suspects. Neighbors sipping lukewarm coffee, whispering about fines and landscaping. At the front sat Margaret with her clipboard, flanked by her loyal board members. Jonathan raised his hand when the floor opened for concerns. "You fined me for a shed that doesn't exist," he began, holding up the letter. Murmurs rippled through the room. "And this so-called evidence you sent me? It's fake. It's been edited." Margaret didn't flinch. "Mr. Clark, the board has reviewed the photo. The structure is clearly there." Rebecca, who had joined him, stood up. "As a professional designer, I can tell you with 100% certainty this photo is manipulated. The HOA is trying to fine him for something that doesn't exist." The room grew tense. Neighbors looked between Jonathan and Margaret, whispering. Margaret's smile didn't waver. "We'll take your comments under advisement, but until then the fines stand. Failure to comply will result in escalating penalties." Jonathan's heart pounded. They were doubling down, ignoring clear evidence, brushing him off like a nuisance. He realized something deeper was going on. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate. And if he wanted to clear his name, he'd have to dig much, much deeper. The fines kept coming. $250, $750. Each letter arrived with another photo of the phantom shed, each one slightly different, as if someone had lazily dragged and resized the fake image. Jonathan stopped laughing. This wasn't incompetence. It was a scam. He started investigating. First, he requested the original file from the HOA, citing his rights as a homeowner. They refused. "Proprietary evidence," Margaret said curtly. That alone raised red flags. Next, Jonathan talked to other neighbors. To his shock, he wasn't alone. The Martinez family had been fined for a deck extension they never built. The Patel family for a second driveway that didn't exist. Each of them had received grainy photos as proof. This is systematic, Jonathan realized. They're fabricating violations to squeeze money out of us. With Rebecca's help, he compiled all the images into a dossier, pointing out identical copy-paste marks, cloned patches of grass, and repeated shadows. The evidence was damning. But he didn't stop there. Jonathan reached out to a local news station known for its On Your Side investigative segment. He emailed them the entire packet of information. Subject line, HOA extortion scheme, fake photos, fake fines. 2 days later, a news van rolled into Maplewood Estates. Cameras recorded Jonathan standing in his yard, holding up the HOA letters while the reporter asked, "So, where exactly is this shed they fined you for?" Jonathan spread his arms to the empty lawn. Nowhere, because it never existed. Neighbors gathered, emboldened to share their own stories. The reporter interviewed the Patels, the Martinezes, even Rebecca. Within hours, the story was online. Maplewood HOA accused of fake fines with doctored photos. The fallout was immediate. The next HOA meeting was packed wall to wall, buzzing with outrage. Homeowners waved copies of the news article. Cameras were everywhere. And when Margaret walked in, her smug smile was gone. Jonathan stood. "You tried to rob us with ghost fines. You used fake photos to steal from this community. We're done being quiet." Cheers erupted, the room shaking with anger. For the first time, Margaret looked cornered. Within a week, county officials launched an investigation. The HOA board was subpoenaed for financial records, and what they uncovered made the ghost fines look like the tip of the iceberg. Thousands of dollars in violation fees had been funneled into a mysterious administrative account that, surprise, was linked directly to Margaret's personal bank. The scam unraveled fast. Margaret and 2 board members were forced to resign, facing charges of fraud and embezzlement. The community voted in new leadership, homeowners who vowed transparency and fairness. As for Jonathan, he became something of a neighborhood hero. Neighbors who had once quietly nodded at meetings now stopped him in the street to thank him. "You saved us," one elderly resident said, gripping his hand. "We thought we had no choice but to pay." But Jonathan's favorite moment came weeks later, when the news station returned to film a follow-up segment. Standing in his backyard once again, Jonathan laughed as the reporter asked, "So, still no shed?" "Still no shed," he said, grinning, "and now no ghost fines either." The camera panned over his empty, sunlit yard, a yard that had become the center of a scandal, the undoing of a corrupt HOA. And as the story spread across the internet, one thing became clear. In the battle between homeowners and power-hungry HOAs, sometimes the truth itself was the best revenge.